Our American way of life. Isn't it grand? Peace, freedom, and bacon and eggs. Seems perfect. But what if it's not? Friends, your future may not be as secure as you think. Where will you be when the atomic bombs fall? You can secure your family's future by reserving a spot in a state-of-the-art underground vault from Vault-Tec. That's right, Bob. Act now, and your family can wait out the horrors of nuclear devastation. And Doris, the vault will have all the amenities of your modern-day home, and it's attractive. And Sally, in the vault, you might meet that special someone, just as you would on the surface. And in a few short years, you and your fellow vault dwellers will repopulate our great country. And Billy, you'll have lots of swell kids to play with. Reserve your family spot in a state-of-the-art underground vault today. Sign up now and prepare for the future.
I love those dear hearts and gentle people who live in my hometown, because those dear hearts and gentle people will never ever let you down.
There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men.
Earth. Those days, there were giants.
There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown.
My veins, again, the tempting fate, so nothing's in my way. I put them in a grave. Let me lace up my boots, 'cause I must face some giants. I must face some giants. Let me lace up my boots, 'cause I must face some giants. I must face some giants. Let me lace up my boots, 'cause I must face some giants. Heaven and hell are waiting. Don't need more motivation. I'll go down face to face, yeah. Just put me center stage, yeah. My name painted in bloodstains, making war with anything standing up in my way. With a wreck from the Let me lace up my boots, cause I'ma slay some giants. Giants. I'ma slay some giants. Let me lace up my boots, cause I'ma slay some giants. Giants. I'ma slay some giants. Let me lace up my boots, cause I'ma slay some giants. Made it in blessing, making war with anything, standing up in my way. When I run from the mud to the grave, I'll be making your bed in the grave, yeah. My name, made it in blessing, making war with anything, standing up in my way. When I run from the mud to the grave, I'll be making your bed in the grave, yeah. Giants, giants, I'ma slay some giants. Let me lace up my boots, cause I'ma slay some giants. Giants, I'ma slay some giants. Let me lace up my boots, cause I'ma slay some giants.
Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Numbers 13:33. And there we saw the giants. There were giants in the earth those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. There were giants in the earth those days. There were giants in the earth those days.
The universal story agrees with the record of every major culture of the ancient world in which the astonishingly consistent story is told of gods that descended from heaven and or came through spiral vortices to materialize in bodies of flesh. From Rome to Greece, and before that to Egypt, Persia, Assyria, Babylonia, Sumer, the earliest records of civilization tell of the era when powerful beings known to the Hebrews as watchers, and in the book of Genesis as the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, mingled themselves with humans, giving birth to part celestial, part terrestrial hybrids known as Nephilim. The Bible says this happened when men began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them, when the sons of God saw the women's beauty, and they took wives from among them to sire their unusual offspring. I believe a record of this is recorded in Genesis 6:4 when it says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. This is Dr. Thomas Horn, and you are watching End Times Productions.
What's beneath us?
The ancient ones, the gods that used to rule the earth.
During research for our best-selling book, On the Path of the Immortals, I was given the unprecedented opportunity, really, to sit down with and to film Dr. Don Mose Jr., a third-generation medicine man who I met with for a large part of a day, and he told me the oldest legends of the Anasazi, which he had been told by his great-grandfather, who likewise had been told by his ancestors, which included stories of the Anasazi turning to sorcery, to sacrifice, cannibalism, after they had lost their way and were driven insane by a reptilian creature, which they depict with a halo above his head, of all things. Images of that being are, by the way, included in the petroglyphs that we filmed inside the canyons. And I believe that they likely attest to the fallen reptile or reptiles of biblical fame, which also misled humanity. As I said in the traditional Hogan at one of the Navajo schools, Dr. Don Mose teaches at, he began drawing in the sand on the floor and reciting the first part of the story of the ancient Anasazi and how it had been repeated to him by his father and grandfather, who had also been told by their ancestors and so on, a legend that Dr. Mose alone had undoubtedly repeated hundreds of times before at the Navajo school. Now, since it was obvious to us that this Navajo historian was really indifferent to our camera and our recording plans, and in fact, I could tell he was really uncomfortable with us putting him on film, but thankfully he let us proceed nevertheless. But I sat there and listened respectfully as he proceeded for nearly 2 hours to describe to this white man what's only ever been allowed a few times in history before, and that is the legendary stories of creation, of giants, of a great flood, of a reptilian deceiver, all from the voice of the nation's top medicine man. Dr. Mose even sang to us in the antiquated tongue of what I would call Old Testament history, paralleled in their earliest antiquity using the Navajo language. Now, not only did Dr. Mose substantiate the age-old and globally recorded story of those who come through portals and the impact that they have had on biblical and global history, past and present, not only did he weave Navajo Indian myths and legends seamlessly with our understanding of the 6 days of creation, the arrival of the Nephilim, and their connection to judgment by a global flood, followed by the repopulating of people around the world, and then a second incursion of the giants. But there were several instances in which, when I pushed Dr. Mose for greater detail, he would go off script, actually delineating from the official Navajo storyline to provide greater consistency between history and the way the Bible itself recorded certain events.
This is part of a ritual sacrifice.
As Mose was following the official storyline, the one that you would get from the Parks Department in the four corners of the U.S., about how the Anasazi didn't disappear, but rather they slowly migrated out of the area and became the modern Pueblo Indians, I expressed doubts to Dr. Mose about that story. And he responded by grinning just a little bit and saying, well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but, and then he proceeded to tell us the older stories that his grandfather had repeated about these mysterious people actually disappearing after they came under mind control from a reptile with a halo, this carnivorous creature, suspiciously similar to what I later described in the Path of the Immortals book as fiery seraphim, which comes from the Hebrew seraph, the Hebrew Old Testament, fiery serpent, which also corresponds with a lot of other testaments around the ancient world, including the Sanskrit sarpa or sarpeen, which means reptile, and so on. Now, another case in point is when I told Dr. Mose what we had learned from the Apache about cannibalistic giants and then God destroying them in a flood. And he looks right into the camera and he says, "Oh, yes." And then he reaches over and he picks up this illustrated book that he had authored that's used in the Navajo Nation schools and libraries. And he opened to show us an artist depiction of a giant that had stood between 30 and 40 feet tall. And then he starts saying there was this time when the earth was infested with such great giants and alien gods that came down and destroyed and ate the people. Some of them were in human form. Others, he said, were monsters like human animal hybrids, which I think the Old Testament also describes. And then he followed that story with the famous Navajo legend of the White Shell Woman, who gave birth to two of the most important characters in Navajo mythology, the twin miracle-performing sons, one of whose names literally translates slayer of alien gods, and his twin brother. And together, those two great warriors killed many of the giants, hybrids, and the monsters that were destroying mankind. As Dr. Mose described these ancient tales, I couldn't help but think of David killing Goliath, and then later other giants with his mighty men. Then there was a point where Mose paused and he said, "You know, when the Christian missionaries first came to America and told our people their stories of the giants and the great flood, he said, we smiled and let them know that we already knew these stories, that they had been told to us long ago by our own ancestors." After a week on the road, having covered hundreds of miles of reservations to walk amidst their multiple ruins, including hogans, temples, kivas, to follow guides and visit with a medicine man, not to mention tracking down and photographing petroglyphs, we were finally on our way to the last site that we were going to visit, one that our Cherokee guide had told us not to miss. We already collected enough pictogram and logogram images from ancient rock engravings throughout the Four Corners area to make our case and to calculate for our purposes a recurring theme, which definitely seemed to match the Middle Eastern and biblical stories of portals, reptilians, fallen angels, giants, and the havoc that those creatures had played on the old world. But this final petroglyph that was important, our guide had said, and one that we could drive right up to. So we decided to make one final excursion, this time into Utah, 50 miles north of Moab, where one of the largest known collections of petroglyphs is located in the San Juan County. This storyboard that we would visit there was etched in sandstone as early as 1,000 years before Christ. And it records practically every element contained in the Bible and extra-biblical texts involving spiral vortices and those who come through them, including human-animal chimeras and even giant six-fingered and six-toed footprints in pursuit of much smaller five-fingered and five-toed humans. Even that reptilian that Dr. Don Mose had described to us with its halo was drawn there, just a couple of feet away from the alien-looking bug-eyed creatures. This location is also easier to get to than most of the ones that we trekked to, yet it's as important, if not more so, than any petroglyphs. You could spend days hiking over miles of rough terrain to reach. It's called the Newspaper Rock Petroglyph, and is somewhat decipherable as to which images are older due to the fading and darkness of the earlier depictions, which are certainly the most mysterious with their alien-looking creatures and suits and what might even be some type of a flying craft. And archaeologists believe the writing on this Great Wall continued from 1,000 years before Christ or earlier up until about AD 1300, the same time that the Anasazi suddenly disappeared. The Anasazi used images and symbols similar to those found globally that connect to a first and second incursion of giants and the mountainous gateways that those creators came through. Now, that being true, if you take only the images that the Anasazi left behind and compare them to similar, in some cases identical, universal symbols found elsewhere around the world where the stories and meanings of the images have been made clear, and keeping in mind that these legends materialized globally at approximately the same time, when the Torah, that is Genesis through Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible, was written around BC 1300, this would have been the same time when archaeologists believe the Anasazi across the world from these Bible lands were drawing giant 6-toed footprints on a slab wall in Utah and facing an alien enemy, as the name Anasazi implies. When the writings in the Torah are compared with other ancient texts, including Enoch, Jubilees, Baruch, Genesis Apocryphon, Philo, Josephus, Jasher, Jubilees, and many others, not counting the accounts of the American Indian tribes on this side of the world, it's clear that this is more than a legend. It is history. It's a chronicle told through different people's methods and worldviews involving giants suddenly infesting the entire world and then being wiped out in a flood, then somehow returning in a second incursion. This story was written down globally, from Hebrew scrolls to Indian petroglyphs, to provide the oldest recorded testament of part human, part angelic creatures who were in turn the offspring of hideous reptilian entities, or what the apocryphal book of Enoch calls fallen watchers. In the beginning, the great creator made everything. Then powerful reptilians came down from heaven through portals, the spiral, halo, and reptilian symbols that we found in the petroglyphs. They came to deceive the world, as Dr. Don Mose told us, and the world fell into darkness. This is also hinted in one of the meanings of the word Anasazi, which can literally be translated, according to the experts that we discuss this with, as an alien enemy. Portals, represented in ancient spiral symbolism besides giant 6-toed footprints and horned humanoid figures, opened at this time, and alien gods or monsters and giants came through them. Some of these giants had 6 fingers and 6 toes, just as described in the Old Testament. Then the Creator destroyed the monsters and giants in a great flood. And yet the giants and reptilian deceivers returned. They turned to sorcery, to cannibalism, and human sacrifice.
The Nephilim. In the Old Testament, the Bible speaks of angels that fell to earth whenever Satan was cast out. One theory is that they had children with humans on earth, which created great creatures known as Nephilim, or giants. Many think that several of these tribes in the Old Testament that were ordered to be wiped out by God were these Nephilim giant creatures. An example would be this giant Goliath in the book of Samuel, who was said to be over 9 feet tall. The conspiracy about the Nephilim is that they still exist today and that there's small tribes of them throughout the world, like the alleged giant of Kandahar story of the soldiers being attacked in Afghanistan. And it's crazy how many times giants have been referenced throughout history.
What kind of a monster are you?
Bone cruncher, child chewer, meat dripper, gizzard gulper, butcher boy.
Please don't eat me.
You think because I'm a giant that I'm a man gobbling cannibal?
Gigantic humans did exist. They are petrified. Research Tartarian.
If at first the idea is not absurd, then there's no hope for it. Albert Einstein. People of the world, welcome to The Giant. The visitor attraction for the 21st century. The exhibition space featuring the Giant Experience, a glorious celebration of the great men and women of your country, inventors, artists, scientists, celebrities, and athletes. The viewing tower. See the city from the shoulders of a giant. The roof garden. New dimensions in retail, gastronomy, and special events for diversity of occasions. The world's tallest moving sculpture. Its head moves. Its arms move. It speaks and sings. A place to behold heroes and superheroes. A space to celebrate the great and the good. The game changers, the icons of your city and country. Every hour, the giant transforms into an extraordinary person, from sports, science, characters, your favorite heroes, and recites poetry and words of wisdom to the crowds below. A space to celebrate the great and the good. The great men and women who have made this world a better place to live in. A digital canvas for artistic creation. A creative canvas like no other. A digital art gallery in the sky that displays masterpieces from today and throughout the ages. The Giant brings artists together from throughout the world. A beacon for brand celebration. A new eye-catching platform for businesses to reach customers in a novel and memorable way. A giant opportunity. A business model that delivers world-class experiences and world-class profits. An economic stimulator that enhances tourism, job creation, footfall, and commercial activity in the city. Join the Giants movement. The world's largest selfie. An homage to human potential. The world's most awe-inspiring selfie. Visitors are scanned and instantly become a giant. An experience to share and remember for a lifetime. There's nothing like it on the planet. Imagine you can be the giant. The Giant transforms into a stage and a backdrop for festivals, concerts, performances, and special events. Let the party begin! If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. The Giant. Coming to 21 cities in 2021. Awaken the giant in you.
Giants are real. Back in Africa, archaeologists have recently uncovered a 4-foot-long footprint, which is said to be between 400 million and 300 billion years old. Putting this into perspective, this 4-foot-long footprint would have belonged to something at least 27 feet tall. Furthermore, a 38-centimeter finger fossil was found in Egypt, and scientists have said that it would belong to something at least 16 feet tall. There have also been carvings done by prehistoric cavemen that actually depict giants in them. Putting all these with evidence of enlarged bones that have been uncovered by archaeologists, is it possible that giants are real?
Creep on in.
U.S. Special Forces encountered giants in Antarctica. You heard it here first. It was the early 2000s, right around the same time as the Kandahar Giant, when a team of Navy SEALs was called to Antarctica. Their mission was to plunge deep into the ice shelf and explore ruins recently discovered by ground-penetrating radar. Upon arrival at the site, they would begin their descent down a large pre-drilled hole that would open up into a cavern. As soon as their boots hit the ground, they would quickly realize the cavern was actually a massive megalithic structure. The structures were thousands of years old, and they believed them to be built by the ancient builder race, the same ones that built the pyramids. Amazed, they began exploring, eventually stumbling upon a large door. One of the SEALs would approach the door and touch it with his hand. To their surprise, it began shifting, almost as if powered by anti-gravity. The 30-foot door would move back and to the side, letting them into the corridor. In utter disbelief, they decide to split up into groups of 2. They cautiously make their way around the room, noticing hieroglyphs of which they'd never seen before. As they sweep the area, senses heightened, one of the men yells, "Guys, come look at this!" As the rest of the team approaches this portion of the structure, they instantly notice the super advanced tech, and their comrades staring at a large crystal chamber. They brush a layer of frost off that has accumulated over thousands of years. And inside, they see it. It's approximately 14 to 16 feet tall. Its massive frame towering over the men. Its eyes still open, with a fierce look on its face, almost as if it's staring at them. The warm blood running through their veins turns cold. As it is said, when a soldier first experiences these beings, it changes them. They will never be the same, but some take it better than others. It is reported that some soldiers lose their head completely upon sight. They simply cannot handle it. They have to back out. Others' hair has turned completely gray in an instant. They are simply that afraid. As they're pondering over what they're looking at, one of the soldiers says, "Guys, check it out." They look over, and 2 of the chambers have already been broken through. These crystal chambers had them in a stasis, and they are now waking up. That's when the lead SEAL yells out, "All right, fellas, you know what time it is. On me." They hastily start swapping out the clips on their assault rifles. They've come prepared, as if they already knew what they were going to encounter. The rounds in these new magazines were something special. They weren't regular hollow point lead. They were actually made of pure copper. As the military and the Pentagon knew that pure copper is the only thing that kills these beasts. Using anything else is futile and will not hurt them. As they're finally getting locked and loaded, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they hear a cry. And no sooner do they turn around, one of the beasts flies from behind a megalith. It grabs one of the soldiers and slams him to the ground, killing him instantly. The second beast jumps from a ledge above, landing on another, squishing him to a pulp. "Fire, fire, fire!" They open up. The beasts run through the bullets as if they don't even touch them. The rest of the men scramble to take cover. They slide to cover and look back. They're gone. They move throughout the corridor swiftly and silently. So after shooting the giants with the pure copper rounds, they can tell it had an effect. They were slowed enough for the team to take cover behind a monument. And when they peek back around the edge to see where they're at, the giants are gone. So after taking a moment to gather themselves, they start heading down the opposite direction of the corridor. They stay within cover of the pillars running down the entire walkway, and they cover ground fairly quickly. They've covered probably close to a quarter mile. This cavern is huge. when suddenly they hear the two giants cry out. They turn around, and there they stand in the middle of the corridor. They begin trotting towards them and then full-on sprint. They're coming for them. The seals begin to engage their targets again. This time, they don't walk through it. They begin to slow in their run and eventually fall to the ground. The copper rounds work, and before long, they're laying there breathless. A sense of relief swarms over the team, but it was short-lived. As soon as the other two dropped, another cry. It was the third giant. It was out of its stasis. Move, move, move! The seals turn and begin running. They look back, see the giant running towards them, and continue. They can hear his footsteps, and then they just stop, and they turn to see where he's at. He's gone. It seems as if though he's almost playing with his food. They see another large doorway at the end of the hall, probably another quarter mile up. They're glancing around, looking for the giant. They can't see him. Then, as they're passing a section with large monuments on each side, one of the soldiers in the very back lets out a blood-curdling cry. The giant appears as if a blur from one side of the hallway to the other, and on the way through, he grabs another soldier. So he seems preoccupied with the said soldier for a little bit, grabbing his first out-of-stasis meal. The team approaches the doorway, and again it's being blocked off by a large stone slab. One of the soldiers notices a cutout in the rock wall, and they press it. It begins moving. The giant hears it. He looks up and starts their way, moving swiftly. Hold him off, fellas, let's go. The team engages the target again. At this point, there's only 3 or 4 of them left, and the giant's running through the bullets as if they're nothing. It's not looking good when the group lead throws his gun down and reaches for a pouch on his vest. At this point, the door has finally slid open. It's within feet, and they dart through. The lead soldier turns around and chucks a grenade through the doorway. It's full of copper bearings. Take cover! They step behind the wall. The grenade goes off. Dozens of bearings hit the giant. It finally drops. They turn around to a massive cave system. They can't believe the size. They figure its total width is a couple miles. It is believed that the giants themselves, or whoever created them, had bored a tunnel. This tunnel ran from Antarctica all the way up to the Northwest Territories in Canada. They supposedly have a plasma drill that can drill up to 7 miles a day. This is what they use for travel. This large tunnel has smaller tunnels branching off of it, leading through the mountains, likely where all the missing hikers end up. The soldiers would eventually find their way to the surface, contact command. Most of them never spoke of it again.
Those of you that follow me will know that I split my time between Italy and the UK. Now, from Sicily, it's an hour flight to Rome. I caught the flight and I went to check out the Vatican. Beautiful building, great architecture, lots of hidden secrets and sacred geometry. Now, people look like specks of rice compared to this building. That's how big it is. Now, look at this giant door here. This is what this video is about. What is the purpose of doors? The purpose of a door is to let you through and to keep people out. Now, look at the size of the archways and the doors, and look at the size of the people. Now, pay attention to where the handles should be on the doors. You've got one very low for normal sized humans like us, and there were previously ones for giants. Now, the symbolism on the floor is seashells and stars, the 8-pointed star, and I'll make a video on that later. Now, look at the bolt on the top of this door. Look at how small this guy is. Now, as he closes the door, you will see at the very top, there's a bolt. Like, you know, when we have bolts on our door, we slide the top one, we do the middle one, and then we maybe key it. Why would it be up there if you can't reach it? Now, it can only mean that these giant structures and giant doors were built for giant people. Now, I've touched on this with Tartaria, and you had different sizes of giants, just like you have different sizes of people today, ranging from 4 foot to 7 feet. Now, these other doors are around the Vatican and buildings around the Vatican. And look at where the handle is on the door. Now, this door here has been cut to make space for a normal sized human. But in reality, this door is double the size of a normal human. And you can see the holes there. Look at the holes in the middle where the handles used to be. They've been removed and they've been put lower for normal sized humans, which come up to about the breast or the belly button. This is called the Pantheon in Rome. Great tourist site. You'll see me on the next picture there with my hat, and I'm pointing up at where the handles used to be. Now, you know, these giant doors, megalithic structures all over Rome. It's littered with these, with giant columns, big stones, and big doors for big people. And look at this. The handles are above the guy's head. And this was funny because he opened the smaller door, which they cut. They cut to make this the size for smaller people. And he walks in. That made me laugh. And I caught this live in Rome. So you can have a look at the style of the building. This building is a Tartarian style building with a Phoenician fascia over it. Now I will make more videos on Tartaria and Phoenicia and explain to you what's going on here with the lion heads and the columns and the triangles above it. But this is a church not too far from the Vatican, a smaller one. As you can see just above it, there's a sign, and the sign has been painted on with the name. It's very primitive looking. You can tell we today are inheritors of this structure, and we have and look, you can see where the handles are. We've just kind of claimed it and repurposed this building and claimed it as a church. But look how big the handles are, and look at where they're positioned on the door.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, it was just around nothing.
For miles.
Right.
So very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. About 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with an ambush. But that was even odd because at the point of ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something. Okay, there was no calls made, just off the grid. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, a go path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard. Everybody.
And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was long past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him, starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was so real.
Now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. And he's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. And our weapons components were in force. We had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving. Dan was dead. Okay. And Wyatt is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo net, like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter. But it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day. That could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you got to remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. The corpse that's been around for a while
really fell.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell, but once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large possible human creature.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan. How many troop members are you with?
We had 6 on my crew. And when we say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not fly into the wilderness. We actually flew into a base. I guess the thing was transloaded out of the mountains by a CH-47. But I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing. Basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds of what was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
Of course, we're upset. That's a given. Okay. We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted.
How many fingers?
6 toes.
And 6 toes.
And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly, that's what they look like.
Stories about giants have existed in human history in different forms. Sometimes called ogres, giants are thought to be creatures so big that the earth trembled when they walked. Many people believe that these stories about giants are just fairy tales, while others believe that giants did exist in our physical world. In this video, we will show you the top 20 most mysterious discoveries of giants. Chinese giants. In 2017, archaeologists unearthed skeletal remains of unusually tall people in Shandong, China. It was believed that these giants may have lived in China some 5,000 years ago. The human-like bones were very huge and strong, and at heights of up to 1.9 meters. Along with these bones, pottery, and various jade items were also found. This archaeological finding was more amazing because people in China are not known to be that tall. If China had giants, imagine how tall prehistoric people from other countries would be. Alien skull in Peru. A renowned Peruvian archaeologist discovered what is said to be mummified remains of an alien creature. This creature has a triangle-shaped skull, which is nearly as big as a 20-feet-long body. How is that even possible? This does sound like Reddit stories, doesn't it? The strange details of the skull point to the fact that this could be an alien. What's more, scientists have been unable to link the physical features of the skull and the alien body to any of the ethnic groups that have lived on Earth. Seems like this is an extraterrestrial being. The giant skeleton of Saudi Arabian desert. A recent gas exploration activity in a Saudi Arabian desert uncovered the ancient skeletal remains of humans of a phenomenal size. Archaeologists are conducting various studies to find out the true facts relating to these skeletons' origin. However, local people and religious scholars link these gigantic skeletons to a story mentioned in the Holy Quran. The story states that God created a race of tall, big, and powerful people who could put their arm around big tree trunks and break them. This race was named Ad. This powerful race later turned against God, and they were destroyed. Giant skeleton of India. Could there have been a race of giants in India? Well, crowds flocked to an archaeological site where a group of explorers unearthed the skeletal remains of a human of phenomenal size. Measuring 18 feet in height, this must be the tallest human skeleton in India. Tyre Explorations was supported by National Geographic. Experts believe that the giant skeleton was part of remains of ancient people who were created with phenomenal size. Red-haired giants. Archaeologists found remains of red-haired giants in Lovelock, Nevada. Lovelock Cave was first discovered in Nevada in 1913. In the cave, miners found buried treasures, artifacts, and remains of what appeared to be red-haired giants known as Sitka. The Sitka are thought to be a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants. Miners in Lovelock Cave also found mummified remains of a man having a height of around 6 feet. All of these instances are proof that there was a time when giants did live on Earth. The footprint of God. In addition to skeletal remains, another thing that proves giant people did exist are footprints. Nearly 100 years ago, a giant footprint was found by a hunter in South Africa. Locals nicknamed it the footprint of God. The footprint was 1.2 meters long, and according to estimates, its owner must have stood 27 feet tall. There are no marks or carvings on the rock indicating that the rock was stepped on while it was in molten form. Estimated to be 3 billion years old, the footprint cannot be of a modern human because at the time, life on Earth was in microscopic stages. West Virginia giants. In ancient burial mounds of West Virginia, a number of giant skeletons have been found. Some of these ancient giant skeletons were also found in the early days of coal mining. More were discovered when the ground was later being excavated for other purposes. Also, in 1838, when archaeologists were excavating the Great Creek Mound, which is in present-day Moundsville, West Virginia, they found mysterious giant human skeletons. These skeletons of giants measured a staggering 8 feet in length. Giant skeletons of Ecuador. Legends talk of a city of giants located in Ecuador, deep within the Amazon rainforest. Researchers discovered megalithic structures and pyramids that stood 260 feet tall and 260 feet wide. These structures were built with huge stones weighing about 2 tons each. Initially, explorers concluded that the huge stone structures were natural. Later in the year 1964, locals discovered abnormally large bones, including a shin bone that looked like it belonged to a very tall human being. This led archaeologists to conclude that giants had actually lived in the area. Vampire skeleton of Bulgaria. Next up, we take you to Bulgaria for a discovery that will give you goosebumps. Can you imagine seeing someone stabbing the heart of a dead person to counter the fear that the corpse might return to feast on human blood? I'm sure you can. But have a look at this story. During excavations near the Black Sea, a group of Bulgarian archaeologists found remains of several medieval giants. The massive skeletons were pierced through the chest with iron rods, supposedly to stop them from turning into vampires. This scary story illustrates a pagan practice that was common in villages centuries ago. Bhima's stove. You will be amazed by this story from India that proves the existence of a giant. This is Bhima's stove. The monument is placed at Pancharathas complex, in Mahabalipuram, India. Geologists and archaeologists believe the rock arrangement isn't a natural formation. Rather, it must have been arranged by a giant called Bhima. It is believed that Bhima was 12 feet tall. Bhima used to set up fire beneath the metallic cooking pot. To this day, the underside of the pot has soot remains on it. According to local legends, Bhima was granted invincible strength when he met the reptilian. Giants of Death Valley. Giant bodies were found in an underground network of tunnels in Death Valley. The bodies were found with remains of prehistoric animals, precious items, and huge weapons. The giant human skeletons were 9 feet tall and about 80,000 years old. A newspaper in San Diego first reported the news in 1947, but the story along with the giant remains seemed to have disappeared in thin air. How could such a historic discovery just fade away? What a strange world indeed. The Serpent Mound. In 1894, an Ohio farmer was hunting foxes when he stumbled upon something of major archaeological interest. He discovered graves that contained ancient giants. The graves were located in Hillsboro, Ohio. Interestingly, the graves were right next to a serpent mound. When scientists looked into the graves, they found large-sized bones and other body parts. Many believe that these graves are the same graves that have been cited in the biblical account called the Nephilim. Some people believe that the whole story is a plain hoax. The Bible. It would be a rational position to take if we said that biblical evidence isn't worth much. Nevertheless, many historians have used the Bible for various references. When it comes to our topic, the Bible is a good example, for it states that giants have existed since the times of the Old Testament. For instance, it narrates the story of the big Goliath, whom David defeated with a stone and a sling. Giant ape tooth. A German scientist visited an apothecary in Hong Kong looking for dragon teeth. During his visit, he stumbled upon a large molar in a dusty drawer of trinkets. The most interesting fact is that the tooth did not belong to a dragon or an ape. Rather, it was evidence in the existence of a gigantic creature called a pithecus. The pithecus is the largest species of primate ever discovered and is believed to have partial human origins. Members of this species stood about 10 feet tall and weighed 1,200 pounds. The tooth found by the German scientists dated back 9 million to 100,000 million years. This story kind of reminds one of King Kong, doesn't it? Mexican giants. In March 2015, a photo went viral on social media showing gigantic human skulls. These skulls were allegedly unearthed in a small village in Sierra de Tapalapa in southern Mexico. It was later revealed that the picture wasn't authentic. It was a graphic artist's work. Nevertheless, the picture did spark a discussion about a giant race known as Quinametzin that supposedly roamed Mexico. 20 feet tall Zehua and 10 feet tall Tilcasin were said to be members of this family. An amazing discovery indeed. Mysterious giant skeleton. In the Krasnodar region of northern Caucasus, a team of Russian archaeologists made a wonderful discovery. While excavating a historical site, they found the bones of giants. The bones are believed to be the remains of ancient people belonging in the Bronze Age who lived about 4,000 years ago. Archaeologists revealed that the male skeletons measured a full 2 meters in height, while female skeletons measured approximately 1.7 meters. The Giant of Ohio. This is a giant story from Ohio. Workmen engaged in excavating a cellar located on Webster Street across from a mammoth skeleton one day. The large-sized skeleton clearly indicated that the human to whom the skeleton belonged was of a giant stature. The skeleton measured 7 feet in height. Most of the bones of this gigantic skeleton crumbled as soon as they were exposed to the air. Hence, archaeologists were not able to ascertain whether it was of American origin or Indian origin. One thing is certain, the remains must have been interred a long, long time ago. The giant skull of a cyclops. But first, do us a favor. Click that like button to inspire us. Subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell and you won't miss any interesting videos. Done then? Let's go. Some discoveries may sound like creepypasta, but they were actually real stories. On a foggy winter day, a group of men suddenly came across something that was completely out of the ordinary. An enormous skull with the socket of a single eye was discovered. The grotesque-looking skull belonged to a massive monster. Archaeologists linked the skeleton to a huge mammal giant called a cyclop that only had one red eye. It was estimated that this cyclop was 6 feet tall and weighed 6 tons. This intriguing fossil was estimated to be at least 3 million years old. The famous giant of Alzo. Recently, researchers unearthed remains of a famous giant known as Miguel Joaquin Elegisi. Miguel is considered an important historical figure. He traveled throughout Europe in the 19th century and met with royalties like Queen Victoria. It is believed that Miguel was born with gigantism. As a grown man, he stood 7 feet tall and weighed 470 pounds. After his death in 1861, his remains were interred in a cemetery in Alzo, Spain. Surprisingly, his skeletons, which were long thought to have been stolen, were later found in the same cemetery where he was originally buried. Unique giant skeleton in Thailand. A huge ancient humanoid skeleton was found in a cave in Krabi, Thailand. The skeleton was a male and measured about 6 meters. However, the most amazing fact about this skeleton is that next to the giant skeleton were found remains of a serpent. It is said that the giant skeleton must have been killed by a horned snake in a cave. This discovery sparked widespread public curiosity. It left people wondering whether snakes sneak into graves.